everyone. It is almost Independence Day here in the U.S., and that has historically meant one thing for moviegoers. It's big, possibly dumb, definitely entertaining blockbusters. This year, your main attraction is Jurassic World Rebirth, the latest dinosaur franchise installment. And the fact that there's only one major July 4th weekend release is maybe not a great sign for the Hollywood pipeline. But also 20 years ago, there was also just one July 4th blockbuster that was there to rule them all. That was War of the Worlds, a.k.a. one of the darkest films Steven Spielberg has ever made, a.k.a. the movie Tom Cruise was promoting when he jumped on Oprah's couch. With War of the Worlds now 20 years old and Cruise now about to become an honorary Oscar winner, Chris Rosen and I are taking a look back at this very unusual summer blockbuster and how its legacy has changed over the past 2 decades. It's an Independence Day flashback special. I'm Katie Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Hello, Chris. I'm so excited to get into Spielberg. Like, so early in our podcasting tenure together, it kind of felt inevitable, but we're just jumping right in.
I just love it so much. He's my fave. He's the best.
Is he like really your fave? Like, I mean, I would have said Scorsese, your buddy from your interview you did a couple weeks ago. But
wow, what a plug. That was a great plug.
I mean, look, you got the chance to talk to Scorsese about Saints. Like, I'm not going to let people not know about that.
It's Martin Scorsese presents The Saints, Katie.
Excuse me. So yeah, but like, is Spielberg like your actual fave?
I was thinking about this before we got on here, and I guess I would say, like, while certainly the Scorsese movies that I really love. Like, if you were going to ask me what I would want to watch, I would pick probably one of these Spielberg movies because they're just incredibly watchable. It's just like he has got such a great grasp of making movies that I want to watch, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's weird, and we'll talk maybe later about Spielberg and the Oscars in general, but it does feel like we've kind of lived long enough to see Spielberg be kind of like underappreciated as a filmmaker. Like West Side Story didn't do as well as we would have wanted it to. Like The Fabelmans didn't get seen by that many people, it felt like. But, for our entire lives until the last 5 years, like he was just movies. Like he defined what like a big blockbuster movie could be, which is part of how War of the Worlds, being as strange a movie as it is, like pulls off being such a hit, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, I guess you could say the negative is like he's got to be thinking now he's like the Oppenheimer meme, right? Like at the end of Oppenheimer when he's just like, what have I done? But like at the same time, he is the reason we have summer movies, right? Or at least the idea of summer movies started with Spielberg. Obviously, this 50th anniversary of Jaws this year. So like,
which we could have done also.
He is synonymous with these kind of entertainment spectacles that they don't make anymore, right? Like it would never be like this now. It would have to be some kind of transformer or whatever. It's like this feels so unique, even though it is like decades and decades old IP.
So War of the Worlds is this unique Spielberg blockbuster among so many of them. So like when you're sitting down and figuring out which Spielberg movies to show your kids, like it doesn't have to be in the top 10 because there's so many others. But like, did this movie have a legacy for you at all before I said, hey, let's talk about this movie? It's turning 20.
It's funny. I hadn't watched it in a long time, but watching it again, I was like, oh yeah, I actually liked it maybe less than my imagination remembered it. You know what I mean? Like it's not as great as I remember. Like if you would have asked me before rewatching it, like I'm like, oh man, that's a great movie. And now I'm like, it's fine. It was good.
Yeah, I had watched it. So when back at Cinema Blend, which was my first big writing job, like I did a thing on both World of Worlds in Munich and kind of wrote about the two of them together. And that was back in 2013. So in my head, I had seen it not that long ago, but it was actually a while ago. So I hadn't seen it since then. I watched it on a DVD copy, a terrible transfer of a DVD copy. So that was like really brought the I rented this from Blockbuster vibes of the mid 2000s back. It felt kind of like an immersive experience, which I kind of appreciated. And I guess we should say before we get into it is like, this is a very post 9/11 movie. It's an allegory for 9/11 and the war in Iraq. And currently we are back in the middle of a conflict in the Middle East, which is ongoing. And as you hear this, it will have, we're recording this well in advance, so it will have changed by the time you hear this. But we'll try not to get into too much into the modern day parallels, but I mean, watching this movie kind of before all this recent stuff started, I knew that it was treated as a post 9/11 allegory, but I had forgotten the intensity of it and just how extensive it is, being like absolutely about the moment in which it was made in 2005. Did that stick out for you too?
It's so clearly 9/11 imagery, right? Where like the unfortunate souls in this movie are getting vaporized and they're turning to ash. And then it's like you have Cruise like running through ash and then confronting himself in the bathroom mirror, like covered in human remains. Right? Like it's just this like
I mean, there's a lot of distressing images in that movie,
Yeah.
but when he walks home, he walks past a kid like trailing ash behind him. It is so grim. I could not believe it.
It's incredibly grim, and it's incredibly, yeah, like it is upsetting. Very much post 9/11. You know, you have that with the conflict between Cruise's character and his son, played by
Justin Chatwin.
Justin Chatwin, who I keep looking at and thinking like, "Hey, Aaron Paul, great job," but it wasn't Aaron Paul. It was Justin Chatwin, and I know we'll talk about this later, but it made me laugh because Aaron Paul plays a almost lookalike character in Mission Impossible 3, which was the next year.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, I was like, oh man, Justin Chatwin, though. Good job at Justin Chatwin. But you
Boys
see that
playing
a lot.
opposite Tom Cruise had a vibe back then, I guess.
They did that same kind of hair, but you see that a lot with that character. And conflict of their relationship is like, I want to go fight, and like, what are you even fighting, right? Like this whole like that was all of this is like so much 9/11, and you see that with like the ash, which is obvious to like when they were at the dock later in the movie, and they're kind of trying to escape, which that part kind of.
The
Didn't
ferry
make the most
sequence?
sense to me, the ferry sequence.
Oh, it didn't make the most interesting. Okay.
But I was like, oh, in terms of the 9/11, you know, like accoutrements, or you have like the wall of missing people, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
something that we obviously saw so much of in New York around 9/11. So
Yeah.
all of those things. And the other thing I think like lived through when I'm a slightly older than you, Katie. So
Yeah,
I was
a little bit.
working man at 9/11. So I worked at a radio station, and we were on the air when 9/11 was happening, and I'll never forget, like, obviously living through that. But, like, the idea, this movie I think got really well is where after the plane crashes in Connecticut, I believe, right? They go up to their house, the Cruise's ex-wife's house, and the plane crashes, and he comes out and they're confronted with, like, a news crew. That I think is pretty much my favorite part of the whole movie. But I just found that, like, the aspect of that, the way you don't really know what's happening, the mystery of information, where it's like nowadays we know so much, obviously, because of the internet and social media. And this is still like before that. And so while there is the internet, it's like you still have that confusion. And I felt like that really, this movie really gets into the confusion of a mass event like 9/11. All of that felt like really right on the money in terms of how he presented it in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about the confusion a lot in just the way he presents, like, basically all of the big action sequences. Like, I guess the ferry one, you kind of understand it's overcrowding, they're coming. But, like, that plane crash, you know, they're in the basement. All they hear is this loud noise and fire. And, like, we're not really told why that plane falls out of the air. We can, like, more or less guess. But kind of that idea of, like, randomness and awful things coming out in the world that you don't have a way to explain. Like, that, I think that felt really timely then in terms of, like, 9/11 and just, you know, all these other resulting effects from the war on terror. And like now also feels really telling. Like again, kind of watching this before, you know, the U.S. started bombing Iran, like it still just felt so topical for like a world that is kind of spinning in a direction that you can't quite understand. And like the somberness of that and the way that's put into all of these, like, I think really spectacularly executed action sequences, like from beginning to end. Like that is the thing that so few directors other than Spielberg would be able to pull off.
He's just so good at, he just so understands how to make movies. Like the momentum that this movie has from like basically the entire first 2/3. And obviously we could talk later, like about like Tim Robbins showing up, and that part was derided at the time. And I didn't think it was whatever. I thought it was fine. But one of the things watching it again, so much of his career obviously has been people aping Spielberg, right? We've had like basically an entire industry of filmmakers have just done this their entire lives.
50 years on, yeah, they just keep doing it.
We're just going to keep doing Spielberg.
I mean, just to rewind a little bit. So we got War of the Worlds. It's, you know, adapted from existing IP. In theory, the Orson Welles famous radio broadcast was, you know, more or less the idea of an alien invasion. You got Tom Cruise as this divorced dad, genuinely bad dad, like in the Spielberg dad rankings that maybe we might do at some point if the summer goes on long enough. He's a pretty terrible dad from the very beginning. And he's got his two kids, Dakota Fanning and Justin Chatwin, for the weekend. And then the aliens invade and all hell breaks loose. And he, you know, his teenage son, it basically says like, you want to get us to mom so you can get rid of us, which is like not untrue. Like that is, he's not trying to protect his kids out of, you know, a fatherly instinct at first, and kind of the way that develops over the course of it, I think is really interesting. And, you know, the way that like both Cruise and Spielberg commit to his like shittiness as a father and his selfishness and like being scared, you know, he's pulling off Tom Cruise stuff. But I think after so many years of Mission Impossible and kind of that being the only way that we're seeing Cruise these days, like the way that he is outgunned in the beginning of this movie, I thought was pretty spectacular and like a really interesting leap for both of them at that point.
It definitely is. I was looking actually at Cruise at this time. I mean, we always say this, oh, it'd be great if Cruise went back to doing like real movie. You know what I mean?
Magnolia,
Like it's
Jerry
like that
Maguire,
kind of thing.
yeah.
And I'm like, this was like from '96 when he did Mission Impossible to this. It's like he worked with Brian De Palma, Cameron Crowe, Stanley Kubrick, Paul Thomas Anderson, John Woo for a Mission Impossible sequel, Cameron Crowe again, Spielberg, Ed Zwick, Michael Mann, and then Spielberg for this. So he was getting like the best filmmakers basically of that time, right?
Yeah.
Or like of the time before in terms of like maybe De Palma and Kubrick, and just really doing interesting things. So I agree with you. It was almost like disorienting for me watching because I'm like, oh, I haven't seen Cruise kind of do this. Like he's very unlikable, I think, the character, like you said, and he's incredibly selfish. This is maybe an unanswerable question at the end, but I was like, is that actually his superpower in the end?
The selfishness?
To save his family, right?
Oh,
because
yeah.
like he's like, and I'm like, is this movie endorsing that aspect of it? Is that Spielberg, like, especially now having post Fableman's, like revisiting these movies and knowing like, I'm like, is this an endorsement of that kind of selfishness? Because like
I think for that period of time, it kind of is, because the broader metaphor, right, is like you've been attacked, you're trying to protect your family. Is the best way to protect your family to go out there and try to get revenge on these people who you don't think you can beat, like what the son wants to do, or just to kind of like gather your people around you and do your best to take care of them. And I mean, I thought about COVID watching this. Like, I feel like for me, like a very vivid part of COVID was like being in the car with my kids, being like, we got to go somewhere, but we can't be out there when the virus is. Like, how do we protect each other? Like, again, that felt really timely to me. And I do think, I think Spielberg is a real humanist in a lot of things. And like Saving Private Ryan is all about putting yourself at risk and putting yourself out there. It's not something that is like an overarching theme. But for 2005, I think that message made a lot of sense. And if you can be selfish on behalf of your family, not just yourself, then you're doing the right thing.
Right, like that's the growth on him. And though at the end, I guess I would say like at the end they do have that scene. It's a very interesting ending. Like there's no climax really, right, to this movie, obviously. And so it ends with they're in Boston and they're all kind of walking like in a daze as the tripods are kind of like malfunctioning and falling. And Cruise actually goes out of his way to urge the military to shoot at the tripod because he sees, or his daughter sees, I guess, the birds are able to fly into it, right? So like you have that moment where it's like character growth, like, maybe, good old Ray, terrible dad, he would have maybe at the beginning of the movie been like, screw these people. But now he's like, hey, check out those birds. And I was like, oh, look at that. So like, I guess even bad dad Ray, who didn't know his own daughter had a peanut allergy.
Oh my God.
Totally fine. He's redeemed now.
He doesn't know anything about her, I'm safe in my space coping mechanism thing, which honestly feels very like modern parenting, not something that would have been as popular back then. But, the brother gets it. Like their relationship is interesting.
He never had hummus before, Katey. Did that stand out to you?
I think I had hummus. I actually do remember because I started college in 2002, so not that long before this came out, and I moved from South Carolina to Connecticut, and that was the first time I ever had hummus. So like, he lives in Jersey. Like I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was new. It must have been new.
But
hummus
like,
was new.
Obviously, there were Middle Eastern restaurants near him. But does Ray seem like the kind of guy who would go to the Middle Eastern restaurants or the healthy restaurants? So
certainly
yeah,
not. But that part made me laugh. I was like, oh, look at that. That's funny.
I think I buy it. I mean, what I also like about the ending, first of all, filmed in up the street from our old apartments in Park Slope, not in Boston. But it's the Searchers ending. It's him not being able to go inside the house and into the embrace of familial life. Like the way that it keeps that character on the outside of it, like it fits the kind of dark tone of the entire movie. I think that you can have redemption, but not that much redemption. It makes sense.
Yes, and you. I would say the other thing I love, and this just goes back to why Spielberg I think is so great, and why we don't have what we don't have now is someone who has that ability to remix and recontextualize every classic movie that came like for the last 100 years. You know what I mean? Like Spielberg is so good at that.
Interesting.
And I think that is another reason why like he just understands film history so much.
Yeah.
In that way, and is able to like reference and remix things and kind of pull from those movies that he watched growing up. And now it's like the people are pulling from Spielberg, but it's like a copy of a copy, right? So it's like it kind of like loses a little bit of it, I guess, now. And maybe that's what we've lost when we don't have that specific figure making these kind of movies at this scale.
That's a really good point. I always think of Scorsese again as being someone who's got film history kind of worn right on his sleeve, but it like might be as likely to be like Italian neorealism as blockbusters of the past. So maybe that's the difference between them there.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of like the sequences of this movie, because it really is for the first, I think 2/3 you said, like, it is just action, action, action. Like, you're going from one crisis to another. And you've got, like, the tripods first emerging on the street in New Jersey, which is the very 9/11 part of it. The car on the highway, the way the camera is, like, zipping in and out of it. Like, I assume that's some early CGI at work there, and it looks phenomenal. It's, like, Spielberg playing with all these toys of technology. I think the ferry sequence is the big standout, and you were saying it kind of felt like it didn't land for you, but like in terms of dread and like crystal clear action, I don't think there's anything better than that in this movie.
So I guess I would say, like, to me, the standout is the plane. Like, we don't see it, but the plane crash,
Sure.
I think that part is, like, really cool. And the way he approaches that with, like, the explosion in the basement, and then you kind of see the aftermath. And that set's still around. Like, in Hack season 4, they were walking through that set, right? There's an emotional moment between Ava and her mother on that set of War of the Worlds, which is just so funny.
You can see it if you go on the real Universal Backlot tour, yeah.
Which made me laugh. But at that point, I was just like, some of the movements of the characters, I was just like, why are they doing this? And where do they think they're going? And then just too much to have everyone on that boat sinking and then them swimming to shore. I don't know. It just kind of broke a little suspension of disbelief, even though we're talking about a movie where there are giant alien tripods and they come down in lightning. I mean,
maybe that's the reason. It's kind of, right after that, you run into the military and the teenager runs off, but that is kind of the last sequence, maybe him realizing that, there's only so much of it you can take. But, the part of that like lingers with me is like they the ferry tips over, they're in the water, and a car comes onto them, and there are people inside that car, and they just let those people sink. Like, there is not even a minute where they think, like, oh, let's try to save those people, because there's just no point in it. And it's so dark, again, and, like, so every man for himself, but just feels so, like, in tune with the tone of this movie.
Well, and you see, that's a key scene, too, for Ray, obviously, because I think, like, you see, like, when they're going onto the ferry, he's dragging Lisa Ann Walter, another Emmy potential from Abbott Elementary, dragging her and her daughter, and they just get left behind. And it just is like, well, tough shit, you're gone. But his son is actively trying to save people, and you see there is like a sequence, there's like a shot where you see like Ray looking at him, and you can obviously infer it being like, oh wow, I can't believe, like, this is I'm like never thinking this, and this is my kid, like, putting himself at risk to save these people who have no hope. And I do think that's like where the Ray engine starts to turn, and then you kind of see that too, obviously, when you go into the scene with the Tim Robbins character, because I do think Ray there is thinking of, while it is a selfish act to murder somebody, but at the same time, he's obviously thinking of his daughter in that situation more than himself. And like, he will have to murder this man to protect his daughter. And that is a different flavor of Ray than we had previously.
Yeah.
We're just spoiling this movie. I'm assuming people have seen it. It's
fine. I mean, I wanted to talk about kind of the two things I think people get hung up on the most. And the first being when Tim Robbins emerges, and, they're stuck in this basement with this guy. He's a little over the top. By my memory, not as over the top as he gets in Mystic River, which he had just won the Oscar. Oh, no, does he win the Oscar the same year? Which has the order?
Let me think. I think it's the year before. This is 2005, and this is he wins it this year, right? But Mystic River is from 2004, is that right?
Yeah, he went. So he had won the Oscar like a few months before this movie came out.
I gotta say, 2003 was Mystic River. So it won in 2004, and this comes out in 2005.
Got it. Okay.
Katey, I 100% agree. Having rewatched Mystic River recently, I was like, he is so over the top in Mystic River. Just completely over the top. And this, I was like, man, he really dialed it back.
And also, I think, like, shifting the action to being this kind of tense, like, we have to stay quiet and stay away from the alien thing. Like, I think that's the Shyamalan part that you're talking about. And also, like, having this threat from being a human being instead of a tripod. Because I think the thing you're running into with the people stealing the car, or even the military keeping Lisa Ann Walter on the shore, is that people are threats to each other, even though there's this bigger threat. And having it be on that human level from Tim Robbins, I think, makes perfect sense for where the movie has landed. I think it makes sense for, the relationship between Ray and his daughter to finally grow. Like, and it's not that long. Like, I feel like people always said, like, it goes on forever. It's not a long sequence, and a lot of them has been silently escaping these alien probe things, which is such a great sequence. Like, I don't get it's Jurassic Park in the kitchen all over again.
It's definitely so that was a note I had was like, it's Jurassic Park all over again. So I was like, well, he just kind of did this. But I mean, I agree with you. It is a pretty cool, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it, because it's great.
Yeah.
It's a great sequence. It was great in Jurassic Park. It's obviously great to see it here. And you get to see the aliens coming out, like the literally little green men, basically, like walking around the farmhouse, which I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
Every time you reveal the physical aliens, like, it's Close Encounters knew how to do it. You just have the shadows and then you get out of there.
Yeah, it was funny. One of the movies I kept thinking of rewatching this, I don't know if you thought this, was Nope. Obviously, Jordan Peele is so indebted to Steven Spielberg, it seems like, and especially on that film. But it made me laugh because in, like, Nope, one of my favorite parts of Nope is when the Daniel Kaluuya character thinks he's going to run into aliens, and then you see, like, an alien, and you're like, oh my God, and then it's like ends up being like kids, right, from the from the whatchamacallit, the Stephen Yeun,
the ranch
like
thing.
the ranch thing.
Yeah.
And they're like tricking him or whatever. But I was like, oh my God, like that part, when I saw that in the theater the first time, I was like, that blew my mind because it was such a swing. And then to have like the reversal of it was really cool.
Yeah.
And then here I was like, oh, I wonder if Jordan Peele was like inspired by seeing these little aliens running around the farmhouse, because I don't think it works as well as it does in Nope as it does, you know what I mean? Like I think it works better in Nope than it does in this.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay, so the other controversial thing, we were talking about the ending a little bit. So not just that he gets his family there, but that the teenage kid lives. That like, you know, despite this giant fireball that we saw, that he's still there. Again, I just like want to give Spielberg license for that. Like, I think it is okay to give everyone that one win. And like, I think that's a 9/11 thing too, is like, why did some people survive and some people didn't? There was kind of a randomness to it. Because it's such a bummer ending anyway. Like, why not let the kid live is where I landed on this.
I thought the same thing, and I was also like, what do we think the kid's actually doing that he would get? You know what I mean? Like, we see the fireball, like, you're right, like, that it comes over the hill, but, like, he's not going, like, he had no...
He
was
just got
like,
there.
He just got there. He's like, I want to go fight, and I'm like, sure, but where are you going to go? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was no...
Yeah.
Like, I didn't push back on that either. Like, I was like, it's a totally fine ending, and I actually like that the aliens are befallen by our germs, basically. You know what I mean?
Which is
Like,
from
all
the
of
original,
that,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, all that seems fine. To me, like none of that bothered me. Actually, like I said, it's like really like an anticlimax because there's no action or anything.
No, it is
at all.
It's hard to wrap that up. I mean, and I like the voiceover. It's Morgan Freeman like talking about the germs, and he like the last lines of the movie is like, neither do men live or die in vain, because like the idea is that people had died for billions of years to make us immune to these germs, that we could do it, which is like, again, a very hopeful aspect of this. Like, life is chaos and people are going to climb over each other, but like no death happens in vain in the part of it. Like that felt like a good Spielberg-y kind of way to end this pretty dark story.
Yeah, for 100%. And you know, like you said, the family unit remains like fractured. It's like, it's not a happy ending in that regard, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like totally pat. And it does feel like right for the time, I feel like. And like you're saying, I think now through many other tragedies and events of the world, like it's still timely. Like you definitely could like replicate the coronavirus on this or any number of different things, right? Like where it's just this like, oh, it didn't feel like it aged poorly to me at all. Like I guess I would say.
I think that's where I came out of it being like I didn't try to make my Spielberg top 10. It seemed like a really terrible job to assign yourself. But like I might put this in there. Like I think this movie is really, really well executed, and I think pretty underrated, even though its reputation has been kind of recovered over the years.
I guess that's true. I kind of did make a top 10, Katie, because you were like, we should make a top 10. I'm gonna read you some of mine.
Go for it.
I'm just gonna.
Do you have it in order? Is it in order?
It's kind of in order. I might make moves on the fly, but I had like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, and Catch Me If You Can were my top 3.
Okay.
And then Jurassic Park and Saving Private Ryan. And that's 5. And then Temple of Doom, which is maybe my favorite Indiana Jones, even if it's not the best.
Okay.
Last Crusade, E.T., Lincoln. And then I would put Fabelmans and West. Like, I actually still think he's at the top of his game.
Yeah.
So I think Fabelmans and West Side Story are incredible movies. And they're some of his best. And like, I didn't mention like Close Encounters and Schindler's List. These are movies that I think are great, but I'm like, I'm not in the mood to ever want to put on any of these. You know what I mean?
No.
Like Schindler's List, Color Purple, you know, Close Encounters. And War of the Worlds, I think, is like in that second, just under that 10, maybe with like Minority Report and The Post and like Bridge of Spies, like all these very solid Spielberg movies that I enjoy.
I started trying to make a 10 and then gave up on it, but I just went ahead and put Lincoln at the top of mine.
Lincoln's
like
great.
in terms of like
Lincoln,
the Spielberg movie that like speaks to my heart in this direct way. Like I don't know how I can sit and put that over E.T. like in good conscience, but like I love Lincoln. Lincoln's one
great.
Like that if cable still exists as a thing, like you give me Lincoln on TNT at some point in the day, like I'm in. I will watch whatever part of Lincoln you want to put in front of me.
That's also why I think like Fabelmans and West Side Story have been somewhat not as embraced because there
they
is
can't
no
be
real,
rediscovered.
They can't be rediscovered. There's no cable. There's nothing. But I'm like, those are fantastic movies, and I do hope that they will get revisited.
I have not rewatched Fabelmans at all. I think I rewatched West Side Story one time and loved that movie.
I probably the year Fabelmans came out, I might have seen it 5 times.
Wow.
I just think it's fantastic.
Wow.
And I love West Side Story. I think it's
wonderful.
Really great.
As we wrap this up, let's talk about Tom Cruise. I mean, the extent of the implosion that happened around this movie is like really massive. And there's been a lot of retrospectives about him jumping on Oprah's couch, which happened in May, like a full month before the movie came out, which I don't understand. I don't know why that was the schedule. But he and Katie Holmes have been photographed together. They got engaged not long after this, kind of between the Oprah interview and the release of the movie. The week the movie came out is when he did the Matt Lauer interview, calling him glib and calling out Brooke Shields, like truly an unforced error. And Tom Cruise's reputation just like completely transformed over the course of 2 months and took years to bring back. Like, I do think the reputation of the Oprah couch jumping thing is harsher. I think people have talked about this. Like, the audience was so hyped up. It's like the Howard Dean scream. Like, you take it out of context and it seems crazy. But he did a lot of this to himself and to Spielberg, to the point that they didn't speak to each other for like 15 years after this movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think the first time they were ever, since this movie, was when, I guess it was 2 years ago, Top Gun Maverick at the Oscars.
At the Oscar nominees luncheon,
saved
yeah.
Hollywood's ass. That was like Steven Spielberg saying that to Tom Cruise. It was like, oh my God. Because these guys were like, obviously after Minority Report and this, it's like, oh wow, that's cool. Like, Cruise and Spielberg, maybe they could be, making a lot of things together, and then never again. So like, it definitely, I was reading something and it was like, Spielberg maybe thought it cost the movie like $30 million in box office, right? Like, the negative press score.
I mean, it did really well despite all of that, which is, it tells you how durable that star persona was before he started chipping away at it.
It just is weird watching it now because you automatically think of that because you know the history, but like there's nothing, you know what I mean? Like, watching the movie, it's completely divorced from that. Does that make sense?
Well, and like, and Tom Cruise has managed to really bring himself back in this really interesting, I think, disciplined way. Like, he's still a Scientologist. He still has like all these connections to things that are pretty unsavory to think about. But, the Mission Impossible movies, the Tropic Thunder cameo, like so many things that he did to really carefully kind of build back from that. And now we're at a point where he's getting an honorary Oscar. It feels like kind of the conclusion of that comeback story.
Yeah, it was funny. So we went from War of the Worlds, like you said, to Mission Impossible 3 was the following summer, which was a flop, basically, right?
Yeah.
Or not as much.
Well, to the point that when they made Ghost Protocol, it was like, this is the end. We're phasing him out of this franchise.
And then he came back with Lions for Lambs, which is another
I've never seen
movie.
It, have you?
No. Robert Redford, Meryl Streep, and Tom Cruise. That was 2007. Then, like you said, 2008 is Tropic Thunder, that cameo, which is still being talked about.
Extremely
him and Chris McQuarrie
important in the Cruise comeback story. Like, 100%. Very important.
Never done anything like that, obviously, and like kind of that's what he's up to. And then he did Valkyrie that year, which actually is obviously also really important, completely fraught. No one's ever going to watch it again because of the Bryan Singer of it all. But like,
it is literally about Nazis.
puts him with Christopher McQuarrie, right? Yeah. Which is obviously one of his strongest creative bonds, obviously, with the Mission Impossible movies, and was this kind of a surprise hit because I remember when that came out, it was like, man, this is going to suck, and it still grossed for like 200 million worldwide, so like did pretty well.
Yeah, I remember the images of Tom Cruise in the eye patch being like, what are we doing here? This cannot work. And then it worked.
Then Night and Day with Mangold, and then 2011 is the next Mission Impossible, which was like, oh, we're going to end it, and this is not when they bring in Renner to like take his
Jeremy Renner one, yeah.
And it's such a big hit, and then now we're into this, like you said, like Cruise is ascendant again, and like, doing all these things. But
I mean, I realize as this is airing, the honorary Oscar news is like pretty old at this point, but I do feel like we should talk about it because I was thinking, Cruise getting an honorary Oscar when in theory he could still win a competitive one. He's got the Inarritu movie coming out. You can say that about it. But I was looking at it like, okay, 90s movie icons, like Brad Pitt's got an Oscar, Denzel's got an Oscar, Will Smith's got an Oscar, Leo's got an Oscar. Like, Tom Cruise is kind of the only one still on the outside of that. And like, I think we got to complete the set. I think it makes sense to just go ahead and cover your bases and get it done.
I 100% agree. I mean, I'm of the mind where I think he should have at least 2 competitive Oscars, if not more. Like, I do think like he should have won for Magnolia over Michael Caine. No disrespect to the great Michael Caine for Cider House Rules. Did not necessarily need a second Oscar for Cider House Rules. And then he also probably could have won for Jerry Maguire. I think Jeffrey Rush won that year, I think, for Shine.
I think no one would be too sad if we switched that up.
No, nobody's even thought of that movie in a million years, right? Like, it's just is like, I'm sure at the time, whatever. And I mean, I think you could argue maybe not Born on the 4th of July because he's up against Daniel Day-Lewis, but like, I'm like, he definitely deserves a competitive Oscar in there, especially like you're saying with all these other people who have won Oscars for maybe lesser films or performances.
I mean, look, Brendan Fraser won that Oscar in 2022, and Tom Cruise could have won that Oscar for Top Gun Maverick, and I would not have been mad about it. I'm just putting it out there. At least nominate him. Like,
I don't disagree.
I would have gotten behind that campaign. So to wrap this up, Spielberg's working on another movie right now, right? Like, he's showing no signs of slowing down.
So he just finished this is one of the questions we were talking about is like, will he ever make something like this dark? You mentioned like, and I was like, this new movie he has is a UFO movie, right? And I was like, I do wonder if it will be not just timely and connective to worlds because of the subject, but like it does feel like if you're going to make a UFO movie in 2025, an idea of, I don't even know what it's about, but that's like basically it. I was like, if it's about conspiracies or have to deal with conspiracies, and I think like how people respond to things like that, I do think it will be a timely movie. I guess that's what I would say, having literally no idea about it except for the fact that it's got like Coleman Domingo, Josh O'Connor, and Emily Blunt, and it was shot in New Jersey, and it's about UFOs. But I was like, if it's going to be about that kind of stuff, I do wonder if we'll get another stab of Spielberg having done Fabelmans and West Side Story, both of which was like one for my dad and one for my mom, it felt like, right? Like those movies. Then this is him, like, he's obviously not slowing down. Like you said, like maybe this is not his last movie. Maybe he'll do more. Hopefully he does. Maybe another swing at, he does. I'm not gonna would. Maybe another swing at something that's like timely and also timeless like this.
Imagine like running back to Close Encounters and having like the Richard Dreyfuss character of like, I see something, I see someone no one else does, but like understanding the like really awful version of that it can exist in reality like that. It seems like a downer, but also, in Spielberg's hands, I feel like he has the ability to kind of find the humanity in a lot of the darkest things you can imagine. So, I hope he never stops making movies. I love this man and his movies so much, even the ones that are Stone Cold Bummer. Like world.
Me too. They're great. It's just great.
Okay, last question. Over under. Do you think Jurassic World Rebirth will beat War of the Worlds' $77 million July 4th opening weekend box office?
Great question. I love being put on the spot. I'm going to say yes. Over.
I think probably yes. Even though $77 million for this movie I thought was pretty impressive.
It's incredibly impressive, like we said, like especially now when you look at nowadays. But I do think Jurassic World, the IP machine, will help it, and obviously like people still love Jurassic Park. So.
How much money do you think Spielberg makes off of the Jurassic World movies?
Man, great
probably
question.
Like way more than you're guessing. Like
I'm sure way more, probably enough that he's able to say, I made the Fabelmans and not have to feel bad about it.
So. He was like famously got like, money from Universal Studios, the theme park forever. So like I bet the deal he was able to sign franchising Jurassic Park was bananas. If you're a listener and you know the details of Steven Spielberg's deal on the Jurassic franchise, let us know. Chris, thank you. Enjoy your 4th of July holiday. And we'll be back next week talking about Emmy predictions. So everybody stay tuned. That does it for today's episode. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme song is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, Chris Rosen. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back predicting Emmy nominations next week.